Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming back. It's a pretty typical March day here in Vermont, gray and kind of raw, but I wanted to get out of the house and try my hand at recording something outside. The footage we just showed of me walking up the hill here to my father's memorial was where I wanted to start. Because when I started making these videos, it wasn't really clear to me where to start. I knew I didn't want to spend all my time talking about the past and talking about the mistakes and the really terrible things that I had done, but I also felt like it was important to start there. When I dropped out of sight in so many people's lives, the last experience they were left with me was, what on earth happened to Mac? And it occurred to me that, well, it didn't occur to me, it was really obvious to me that I couldn't really show back up again and sort of say, hi, here I am, without some explanation of what had happened and what that had been all about. So I can't tell the whole story here. I'm not even going to try. I have written a book about it, which my working title is How Not to Find God, which some people appreciate and some people think is not the right title, but we'll see what happens. But anyway, there's more detail there, a more kind of linear explanation of the story. But I wanted to come to this place where that is a memorial to my father, who was such an important part of my past, to mark perhaps a kind of transition in these videos, because while it feels important, as I've said before, there's so many kind of balancing acts in the process of telling this story. And while it's important to really acknowledge what I did, the gravity of the mistakes I made and the harm and the hurt and the violation that I caused for other people, it also, at a certain point, there's a time to not move on in a cavalier way, but move on in a healing and from a place of self-forgiveness and new opportunity. So that's what I think that's the point that I'm at here. And while I'm almost certainly will continue to talk about the things that happened and the things that happened with the making of the film, with Birth of Innocence, with time in prison, I also want to start moving on to more about what I've learned in this process, and perhaps if there's anything of value that, as someone who has kind of been to my own version of hell and kind of learned some things about how to face that and how to come to terms with things that are extremely difficult to look at within myself. And if there's any way that can provide, as so many people have told me as I've told this story, we all make mistakes. And yes, I made a magnitude of mistakes that's kind of extraordinary. But if there's anything that I have learned and that I can share and that I can communicate to people who are wrestling with their own pasts, the mistakes that they've had, the things that are difficult to look at within themselves, whether they're, as I've said before, very, very deeply private or very public. And I guess the first thing that I'll say to finish out this video is that perhaps the most important thing I've learned in this whole process, or experienced in this whole process, is the importance of acceptance. And I mean acceptance in the broadest sense, not acceptance as a whitewash, but acceptance of everything from the horror and the things that we find most difficult to face within ourselves, to accepting the beauty and the new opportunity of a March day, even a cold one, and everything in between. And I think perhaps the most meaningful thing that's happened to me is that even though I had to come to this acceptance by facing the most difficult things within myself, one of the things that I've learned is that it's brought me to a place where I can accept the simplest and the most beautiful. And that's what I'd like to begin to share from here. Thanks so much for coming back. More soon.